So the first part of my presentation is going to be more about like entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial mindset. I'm going to share some ideas with you. Probably many of these are not new to you guys because I know this is what you live and breathe pretty much every single day, right? Some of you are early in your career, some of you are ready to graduate, but certainly you've been thinking and you've been exposed to some of these ideas, but hopefully, like I said, there'll be one or two takeaways. And then I'm going to shift to just sharing my own entrepreneurial journey because it's just something that for me, had one of my professors told me 30 years ago, you have an entrepreneur, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have entrepreneurial inclinations, you can be successful if you dedicate your career to this, I would have said, no way. In fact, my undergraduate degree was in accounting. My undergrad is in accounting. It wasn't until I went to grad school and then my doctorate in entrepreneurship, because again, I'll share this story. So here we go. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time asking for what is an entrepreneur, right? This is something you talk about every single day, you discuss. But the first thing that comes to mind is what? An entrepreneur is someone that, fill in the blank, solves a problem. Or an entrepreneur is someone who starts a business, right? Certainly, that's usually, and especially in a non-academic environment, right? Like you guys understand entrepreneurship, hopefully, in the way that I'm going to explain it. But out in the real world, like the word entrepreneur is, oh, it's someone that started a business, right? Like that's typically the connotation. And so when I said, well, so who is an entrepreneur? We always think about like what I call the poster children of entrepreneurship. Who's this guy? Edison, right? And then we have Ford, right? And the more recent ones, right? Although some of these are not very, I'm not going to say popular. Some of them are in a little bit of trouble politically, different perspectives, different things. But like this is the current poster children of entrepreneurship. At school, I always say, in our university, certainly it's them. Certainly, let me go back. Certainly it's them. But in our school, for example, and I'm sure you guys have these examples. I was meeting with some of them this morning. Graduates who have actually gone out and started something that didn't exist, started their business. At Belmont, some of our poster children of entrepreneurship, the escape game. Any of you have been to one of these escape type locations? I'm sure they're everywhere. The original one was started by Jonathan there on the right, who about 15 years ago in class said, I have this idea. When he explained to me what it was, I had no concept. I was like, what? You're going to be locked up in a room and you're going to give him some clues and then you have to escape? That didn't mean anything to me, right? But he's the one that started it. Long story about him. He's been very successful. He has different stores throughout the United States. Another one of our success factors, #1 pizza in Nashville, in our city, Slim and Huskies. These are all, of course, they don't have a lot of relevance to you guys, but these are all kind of our big success stories that we tell in our university. I know that you guys have your own stories. Pickleball. Is pickleball popular in Guatemala already? Yeah, as it is, I'm sure, in the rest of the world, right? So the gal there on the left, she during COVID, this is a COVID business. She launched Recess Pickleball, and so she sells now all kinds of pickleball equipment, clothing, rackets, things like that. Big, big success story. And my favorite, because these are the first ever alums that have actually pitched on Shark Tank. They pitched on Shark Tank earlier this year and actually got a deal with their business Barbies, right? And so certainly, I say, yes, entrepreneurship is about starting a business, and usually that's what we think about. But the way that we at Belmont, the way that we have shifted our thinking, and this is really only over the last 5 years, it is much more than that. Entrepreneurial thinking, we're now talking about developing an entrepreneurial mindset as the core element of what we teach when in our entrepreneurship major. Because what we know is that about 40% of our students do go on and start businesses like the one I just showcased up there. But the majority of the students, at least not early on, they don't go start something new that didn't exist before. They don't go start a business. Many of them end up working in startups. They like working in entrepreneurial ecosystems, in kind of startups and dynamic and creative enterprises, but they don't start themselves, at least not as the first destination after graduation. And our president, who arrived at the university about three and a half years ago, the first day that I heard him speak, he said, I believe that entrepreneurship does not need to be taught in a business school. I believe that entrepreneurial mindset needs to be taught across the entire university, and every student, the teachers, the nurses, the physical therapists, the architects, and the business people, everybody needs to be exposed and learn to developing an entrepreneurial mindset, which is kind of the way that I've always thought about it. And so I was like, yes, I like that. I'm going to latch on to that idea. And so for me and for my colleagues, for sure, now we're talking about the fact that it is not only about the process of how you start a new business, but it's rather how do you develop a mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset. And the reality is this comes from the fact that this is what employers need and want today. When I go out and I talk to employers, large companies, banks, accounting firms, consulting firms, right, investment firms, and small companies, certainly the smaller companies, right, they all tell me, this is what we want. We want students that have three things. I hear this constantly. And that's why I've been here and learning about your university for a couple of days, and there's so much alignment. This is what I hear, three things. I want students to have an entrepreneurial mindset, regardless of what they're going to do and where they're going to work. I want students to have a global mindset. Right? I want students to have a global mindset, and I want people of character and integrity that have a strong ethical spine, right? And so that the cultural alignment, I've been very pleased and surprised that the cultural alignment between what UFM offers, promises, delivers is very aligned with the way that we do things at my own university as well. And so no presentation is empty without some definitions, right? And so I'll be curious when we engage in like the Q&A, like what of this do you agree with? What do you not agree with? What perspectives do you have? So I'll spend just 2 or 3 minutes sharing my first class. This is like some of the first slides from my first year students, because it allows me to kind of plant the seeds about what I understand entrepreneurship and develop an entrepreneurial mindset is about. And so I'm going to share 2 or 3 definitions and tell you what I like about them, and then maybe what I don't like about them. And so the first definition is by Ronstadt, who says that entrepreneurship is a dynamic process of creating incremental wealth, right? And that this wealth is created by individuals who certainly assume risks, right, of equity, time, reputation, certainly financial, and so forth. It doesn't have to be something that didn't exist before, although it always has to be infused what I refer to as the USP, right? The unique selling proposition. What is it that you're doing that's different, unique, innovative from the one that is doing it across the street from you, right? So it doesn't have to be new. So what I like about this definition is that it talks about being a dynamic process, right? Dynamic means, right, that it moves forward, and it's a process. But process meaning you do A, B, C, and D, then E should happen, right? And so if you understand an entrepreneurial endeavor as a process that you understand, then that's what I like about it. What I don't like is that he uses the word wealth. Now, I like wealth, but wealth is very constraining, right? Because that really constrains you to just thinking like, oh, it's the process how you start a business and make money. But the reality is, and so you see I've changed wealth to value, because value means different things to different people. Yes, in the extreme, in the traditional sense, value means wealth, right? The financial return. But I was just spending some breakfast time with social entrepreneurs, many of them are graduates from the university. And for them, yes, they have sustainable models that they're building in their businesses, but they don't get to the end of the year and say, we were successful because we made a bunch of money. Yes, that's one determinant. Yes, they want to make money. There needs to be the financial sustainability aspect of it. But they're trying to address things that are broader than that. So value, my point here is that value means different things to different people, right? In some contexts, value might mean changing the neighborhood in which I grew up. In some senses, value might mean impacting the environment and employing sustainability practices that protect and support the environment in ways that, right, that don't have to do with money. And so when you understand entrepreneurial thinking and the process of entrepreneurship a little broader than that, right, that then others that are not just the money-minded people can see themselves playing into that. Does that make sense? And so that's a long conversation we have about what does it mean? What for you? What does value mean? What are your? Of course, it's aligned with your cultural values and your family values and the things that you hold to be true and believe to be true. But then it allows to be. It's more inclusive. This definition is more inclusive in that way. The next definition is what Harvard says, and Harvard says that entrepreneurship is the process by which individuals pursue opportunities without regard to the resources they currently control. That's a mouthful. All right? It's a long mouthful, but here's what I like. Once again, it's a process. A, B, C, D, then you do E. That should have an outcome. Pursuing opportunities, this is the other piece that is important I want to highlight in this definition. Pursue the opportunities without regard to the resources you currently control. What does that mean? Right? That means that you are not hindered, you are not dissuaded, you're not persuaded to stop because you don't have everything that you need. In fact, I consult and meet and talk to lots of entrepreneur wannabes, folks that have had ideas for a long time, and many times I hear, well, this is what I want to solve it, but I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the know-how, the technology know-how, the intellectual property, right? And so that one of the key elements of entrepreneurial thinking is that you don't allow the things that you don't have from stopping you. Yes, you have to be resourceful, you have to be creative, you have to kind of navigate to try to come up with a model that works to create that value. But a true entrepreneurial thinking, it doesn't get you to be like, oh, I don't have the money, so yeah, I could solve the world's problems, but I don't have the money, so I'm not going to do it. Does that make sense? So without regard to you continue thinking creatively without regard to the resources you currently control. The last one is what Syracuse University says. And what they say is that it's a process, that entrepreneurship is a process by creating value, by bringing together a unique package of resources to exploit an opportunity. I'm going to talk a lot about opportunity in a second, right? And so it's a unique package of resources. And the visual that I'd like to paint here is like, I'd like to describe it as a puzzle. Those of you that might like to do puzzles, right? What is a puzzle is, right? Just every piece is different, right? And so when you just empty the box, there's nothing. When you bring it together, every unique piece, and in the entrepreneurial process is the financial resources, the technological resources, the human resources, right? The knowledge base. When you put all of these pieces together, right? Then you end up with a beautiful looking puzzle, the finished product, right? Something that didn't exist before. And so that's what entrepreneurship is, right? It's bringing together a unique package of resources to then ultimately end up creating value, something that didn't exist before. Does that resonate a little bit? So entrepreneurs assemble all of these resources, the money, the people, the business model, the strategy, and then they transform it into, yes, possibly a business or a project or an idea or a program. The key here is that you create something of value that didn't exist before before you started. So that's kind of the setup for the rest of the stuff that I want to talk about. I suspect many of these ideas, again, not new to many of you. So let me shift up to now talking a little bit about mindset, right? Again, getting away from like, oh, it's starting something new. Because again, I understand that for many of us, that's the paradigm that we have. And so, mindset. If we had a little more time, I would give you a couple of minutes now and say, hey, what is the definition for you? What is a mindset for you? And probably these are the ideas that would emerge, right? That it's a system, it's what you know. A mindset is what you know, what you believe to be true, your knowledge, the assumptions that you have, right? And all of this knowledge is what helps you process information to guide your decision making, to guide your behavior, right? That's a mindset. And so when we talk about entrepreneurial mindset, is those things that you know to be true that lead you to act in an entrepreneurial way, to espouse entrepreneurial behavior. An entrepreneurial behavior, I like to think about it in the way of just all those actions, all those actions that you have to take, that lead you, that move you to identify opportunities, connect the dots where the dots are not evident to everybody else, and then engaging your intellect, your faculties, right, in ways that allow you to thrive, that allow you to innovate, and that allow you to be creative and create ideas, processes, businesses, programs, services, etc., right? So moving you away from starting a business to just being able to espouse this behavior in anything that you do. Certainly as a professional, in your professional setting, but also in your own personal endeavors. Because in a world that's changing really quickly, right? You guys know this better, because of your age and the culture and the moment in time that you are living in. You understand this better than any other generation before. That in a world that's changing so quickly, like this ability to show an entrepreneurial, to act, to deploy an entrepreneurial mindset is not only a coveted skill that employers want and need, but it is crucial for the prosperity and flourishment of society moving forward, right? And so it's a fast-changing world, right? The way that so many industries, you take any industry over the last couple of decades, right? That the pace at which things are changing. And so the only way that you guys, right, are going to be able to leverage, take advantage, and create value, whatever that might mean to each of you, is to deploy, develop, and be intentional about showing an entrepreneurial mindset. I usually spend a little bit of time talking about, so what does it mean? What does it mean to have an entrepreneurial mindset? What are the skill sets? What are the traits? What are the personality traits? And this entrepreneurial mindset, have any of you ever seen this before? No, this is the National Federation of Teaching of Entrepreneurships. Very, very interesting organization. That's a hub for entrepreneurial teaching, certainly in the U.S. And so they've come up with this graphic, with this construct that I think really does a good job at capturing, the high-level skill sets or personality traits that an entrepreneurial mindset requires. And so hopefully where you're looking at those, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but when you're looking at some of these, hopefully you are seeing yourself in some of these, right? Now, it's impossible to say, yeah, I hit a home run, I'm really qualified, I'm really skilled at every one of them. But to the extent that you see yourself either innately endowed to espouse some of these, right? If you were born, if you're wired to be someone that has that has good communication and collaboration skills, right? Whether you're innately endowed or whether it's something that you are working on developing. And this is where entrepreneurial education becomes really important, right? Because I'm often asked the question, well, can you really teach entrepreneurship, right? Can you really, if I could, if I didn't believe that I could, I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't have pursued this career, right? I do think it's very much like leadership, right? The question of leadership, that gets asked a lot. Are you born a leader or can you become a leader, right? And usually we can better understand, connect that. Well, some of us, yes, are more innately born with the skills, with the traits of being leaders, but by all means, for sure, you can develop. There's tools, there's processes, there's things that you can learn to become a better leader, right? And I feel that developing your entrepreneurial mindset is similar in that way. Yes, some of us are just naturally wired, innately wired to be more creative, to connect the dots and see opportunities where others just see chaos. And some of us have to work at it. But certainly, that's what a entrepreneurial education, much of the stuff that you're doing, I was reviewing your curriculum last night, much of the classes, the courses, and the content that you're covering in your classes is to help you be better at this, right? So again, for now, what I would like to say is that hopefully when you see this, that you agree that this generally captures those traits that are generally accepted and linked to the notion of entrepreneurial mindset. And hopefully, more importantly, that you see that you're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at that, I'm pretty good at that, not so much that, I should work on that. And then go out and figure out ways in which you could improve or acquire some skills to to develop those skills. So as we have this discussion about entrepreneurship is not about starting business, then really it's the emergence of the field, right, of entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial mindset. And so all of these concepts now are, not now, I mean, they've been floating around. This is I guess what I'm trying to say is this is the way that entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial mindset shows up now in other spaces that are different from just the very traditional, how to start a business, right? The notion of social entrepreneurship, for sure, right? It's a concept that you guys are familiar with. I'm amazed and encouraged and excited about. I've been in Guatemala now for about a week and have met and talked to and met lots of really, really innovative and driven social entrepreneurs, right? Addressing the world's social ills and just coming up with really creative solutions. This is a field, an academic field that's really not that old, right? But this was sort of emerged out of the need for capture the concepts of entrepreneurial thinking applied to social ills. The notion of intrapreneurship. Is that a word that is kind of common in your lingo, right? The notion of, or some other people refer it as corporate entrepreneurship, right? This is where I tell students who show up in class and say, but I'm an accounting major and I want to go work for an accounting firm. Like, this, what you're saying, yeah, it doesn't apply to me. I want to go work in banking. Well, I disagree, right? Because having those skill sets, having that way of thinking has a place in a corporate environment, what we now refer to as entrepreneurship, right? One of my favorite stories, and actually one of my favorite academics in the entrepreneurship world, is the guy who he's now a professor of creativity and innovation, but he's the guy that he worked for Frito-Lay. It doesn't get more corporate than, big multinational organization like Frito, but he's the one that brought baked potato chips to market about 15 years ago. Now, today we think baked potato chips, well, all right, you can get fried potato chips, the traditional, the better ones, or the healthier option, the baked potato chips. At the time, that was like that construct of a baked potato chip was an oxymoron. Like it didn't compute. It took him about 10 years to bring him to market. Great example, that's long story short, but a great example of corporate entrepreneurship inside a big corporation, right? Heard the word recently, a lot of people are using the word solopreneurship, right? Um, very common as well. So again, all of this, what I'm saying is all of this just allow you to capture the concept of entrepreneurial thinking regardless of where or how you're going to pursue your professional and your personal endeavors. The last sort of conceptual uh, piece of my presentation is talking about opportunity, right? You have heard me say a few times, right, is that entrepreneurship is the process of identifying opportunities, bringing the resources together, right? Opportunity recognition, opportunity orientation is a big piece of the work of entrepreneurial thinking, right? Where is there opportunity? And so this might be in my entry-level courses, maybe 2-3 weeks out after we start, that we have a conversation about, all right, if you buy this notion that entrepreneurship is about opportunity recognition, where do you find opportunities? Like, what is the process, or how do you give me something that kind of help me think about how to identify opportunities. And so what I want to say is that I've kind of thought about and used the work of another academic in entrepreneurship, Dr. Behringer, who has kind of put opportunity recognition in 3 buckets. Right? It helps you in a very simple way kind of think about where do opportunities come from. Right? Any of you have seen this contract before? All right, so let me spend a few minutes talking about that. Because there is a difference. There's a difference between an idea and an opportunity. Right? Because I've talked to a lot of students, students and other entrepreneur wannabes that show up and is like, I have this idea. And the first process is you have to determine if your idea is an opportunity in the marketplace. All ideas deserve to exist, just not all ideas deserve to exist in the marketplace. I woke up this morning and I had an idea. I want to sell private jets to college students. It's an idea. What are you thinking? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? Well, obviously that's not an opportunity. It's an idea, it just doesn't deserve to exist in the marketplace. It's an idea that needs to be massaged, that needs to be evolved, that needs to be challenged, that needs to be modified, and maybe there's a way in which I can capitalize on that if that indeed is an opportunity, right? Just all ideas deserve to exist, not all of them deserve to exist in the marketplace. So how do you find those that do deserve to exist in the marketplace, right? So that you can actually create value, build a model around it, a business model around it, and create value. And I think an easy way to think about them is put them in 3 buckets. Opportunities come from either observing trends, solving problems, or finding gaps in the marketplace. Let me talk for a minute or two about each one. Trends. What's a trend? Well, trend is something that's popular. Trend is something that's sometimes even a fad, right? Something that's happening in society. We can talk about demographic trends, Gen Zers versus baby boomers. We can talk the growth of the Latino population in the United States. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Tremendous trend in the United States. Demographic trends, economic trends, environmental trends. So if there's a trend, right, usually you can find an opportunity if you capitalize in some of those trends that exist. And so, of course, today in the world, there is a overall awareness and concern for sustainability and the environment. And because of that, right, there's no shortage of endeavors, ideas, ventures, businesses. I was hearing from a couple of those this morning that are capitalizing on that trend, right? Environmental and sustainability trends, not a shortage of ideas, of different, again, projects in that space. The notion of healthy eating. Your generation cares more about what you eat and the source of your food than any generation before. I've been teaching for about 20 years. I've seen it change dramatically. Like, you guys really do care. You pay attention most of the time, right, about what you eat and the source of what you eat. And so as a result of that, certainly in the US, there's no shortage of opportunities. Vegetarian and vegan restaurants. You go to the supermarket and you look at the shelf and the offering of products that are healthier, whether they're vegan or not, but just healthier options. The concepts of farm to table, those types of things are coming from the trend towards healthy eating. That wasn't a trend 10, 15 years ago, for sure, right? The second bucket is the bucket of solving a problem. I always say, if you find a problem that you can solve and you can get someone to part with their money because you're solving their problem, that's a source of an opportunity, right? Many of the opportunities I was hearing from this morning come from this, solving problems, right? One of my good friends from when I was in college lives in Mexico City. What is a problem in Mexico City? Probably a similar problem than in Guatemala City. Parking, right? Traffic and parking, the lack of it, right? And so he licensed, that's a problem, lack of parking. This is a grainy picture, but hopefully it can make sense. He licensed this technology from a German company that, as you can tell, turns a flat level parking lot into a multi-level parking garage in a very efficient way, very cool technology type thing to see it work, right? Problem is there's no parking. Solve the problem. He's doing really well. He's got about 14, 15 of these now spread out through Mexico City, right? Problem, this is a fun story. Catherine Kerrigan, who's a student of entrepreneurship, not at our university, but down the street, she is an athlete. She's older now, but she was a volleyball player. She was an athlete, played for her local volleyball team. Very tall. And on Friday, she tells the story, on Friday when she was in class, the professor said, go through the weekend and think about the problems that you encounter during the weekend and see if you can build a business model, or at least a business construct around that, solving that problem. That was her homework assignment. Again, so she was a volleyball player. She had a lot of games that weekend. And she tells the story. She said, and so I realized that as an athlete, very tall, I never had problems finding shoes, athletic shoes, that fit me. But when it was time for me to buy nice shoes, good-looking shoes, because just to go out on a weekend or to go to an interview or just when I needed to look nice, I had a really hard time finding cute shoes. And part of the reason for her was because manufacturers of shoes, she was tall, and so she had big feet. She has big feet. And it's like the manufacturers, most of them, stop producing 2 sizes before they get to my size. So she's like, that's a problem. Green light. So she said she went and talked to and asked her teammates on the volleyball team, and they're like, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, we have the same problem. All the girls that she played, all the other teams that she played that weekend, she asked, and overwhelmingly she heard, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. Because, again, volleyball players taller. So on Monday, she submitted her assignment and said, this is a problem I solved. The long story is she went on to build Catherine Kerrigan footwear. And so her line of shoes, now the company has had its ups and downs, but the idea for the example here is that she founded a company that specializes in nice, cute shoes that are just larger, that are just bigger, right? Again, the problem was there was no shoes for her. She found a solution. The third one is finding gaps in the marketplace. I'll ask you, what's a market? We all understand what a gap in the marketplace, right? We think the market is anybody that can potentially buy your product or your service, right? That's a market. And a gap, the market niche, the famous market niche, is that piece of the pie that might not be served by other players in the market. That's what we call it, a gap, right? And so if a source of opportunity is, if you find a gap in the marketplace, then that could be a source of an opportunity. There's, I come from Nashville. What is Nashville famous for? Anybody? Music, right? Nashville is known as Music City, USA. Certainly country music, but all kinds of. It's a really great place to visit because of the prevalence of music. And so it's not it's not uncommon that half of my students are in Nashville because they also want to pursue a career in music, right? So there's a lot of talent, a lot of people that play music, that write music, that sing. And so I use this example because this really resonates with them. And I say, who are the big players if you're a guitar player, any of you play the guitar by chance? What's like the famous brand, the big brands in guitars? Fender, right? Fender and Gibson are like the biggest, right? And so if you're a guitar player, like that, and Fender has product line that caters to everybody, right? If you are a guitar player, chances are you will find a Fender guitar that fits what you need. Well, this company is called Daisy Rock Guitars. What they do is focus on a market gap. I don't know anything about guitar playing, but what they focus on is on guitars that are catered primarily to women and primarily young women. I didn't know anything about guitars until I knew about this company, but it turns out that there was enough of a gap that they're not Gibson, they're not Fender, but they're very successful. But all they're doing is they're selling to that, focusing on that gap that the market wasn't filling, right? And so it turns out that the color of the guitars, the size of the guitars, all of that stuff matters. And so they found a gap, and they've created an opportunity, very, very successful. Daisy Rock Guitars. There's a gym down the street from my house that's called 24/7. That's the name of it, 24/7 workout anytime. As the name alludes to, what's their USP? What's their unique selling proposition? They're open 24 hours a day. When they were building it, I would drive by and I see it and I was like, okay, I get it. I see the name, coming soon, workout anytime. And I would think, why? Why would anybody create a business out of their USP, their unique selling proposition, be come work out anytime? I have a hard enough time going to the gym between 7 and 6 during the day, much less I'm not going to have an urge or a need to go work out at midnight, right? And so I myself would think, that's crazy. Well, guess what? Super successful. It turns out they actually have about 2,000 gyms like this throughout the US and probably maybe even internationally, I'm not sure, right? And guess what? Every time that I drive by there at 12 o'clock or at 3 o'clock in the morning, and not that I am out those times that much, I'm usually going to the airport maybe, but not because I'm out partying anymore, there's people there. And when I ask my students, many of my students are like, oh yeah, I go there all the time. And I ask, but why? And I often hear, yeah, and now I understand. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is people that work in times, nurses, for example, is an example I hear a lot about. People in the hospitality industry that work in restaurants, right? Like their schedules are such that if they're going to go work out, they're going to work out at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then often I also hear from college students. They're like, hey, I like to do my homework. I finish my homework at midnight, and then that's when I like to go blow off some steam. Not for me, right? But they found a market niche, and every time I walk by, there's someone there, right? So just sharing some examples there about where opportunities come from. And so I hope, because I know that probably in every one of your entrepreneurship classes, there's some sort of assignment where that's what you have to do, right? Come up with the idea, what is missing, what can you do, and as you develop your entrepreneurial mindset, I hope, right, my hope is that this resonates and that you kind of train your brain to thinking about, all right, is this capitalizing on a trend? Is this solving a problem? Or is this operating in a market niche that hasn't been addressed before? Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Maybe a couple of ideas. I hope so. I hope so. All right, let me shift gears. I want to take the last few minutes to tell you about my story. I think, as I said at the beginning, had someone said to me 30 years ago, accounting major, a major in accounting because all my friends were majoring in accounting, because I knew there were jobs, because people had told me I was good with numbers, although that didn't turn out to be so true, at least during college. It changed later. But that I was going to be an entrepreneur and certainly a social entrepreneur, I would have said no. Like, that's just not me. That's not my path. There were some expectations, cultural, family, et cetera, about who I was going to be, who I was going to become. And so I'm not one that can say, I was born an innate entrepreneur. I became one, right? And I became one, and today, I teach this stuff, right? And so I find that sharing my story might resonate with some of you, and hopefully find it a little bit of a couple of nuggets of interest and wisdom. And so for me, it all started actually in school. I told you I went to undergraduate in Mexico City. I got married. I moved to the United States. And then when I was in the United States, I said, well, I want to get my MBA, a dream that I had that I probably shared with many of you, graduate school, going to study somewhere somewhere abroad, etc. Makes me more qualified, better skilled, those types of things. So I found myself living in the United States and said, okay, well, I'm going to go pursue my MBA. And so I enrolled in the program, and that's when I took my first entrepreneurship class. And very much like Catherine Kerrigan, in my entrepreneurship class, one of the assignments was find an idea that you could see yourself deploying, building a business model around it and deploying it. And so it's a really long story, but the idea was born in that class that I took. And the idea was, or the problem, let me describe the problem. The problem was this. This was now about 25, 26 years ago. Immigration. The migrant populations from Latin America, Mexico, Guatemala, rest of Central America, not so much back in those days, not so much South America as it's the case today. But back in those days, it was primarily Mexico and Central America, right? Tremendous levels of immigration, mid-90s, especially to the southern part of the United States, where I live, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Arkansas, like those places in the South that had not, up until those times, had not seen really a large number of Latinos living in those states, right? The Latino community back in those days primarily was settled in Texas, in Florida, in California, right? But certainly not in those states. But it was in those times, and in particular in Nashville, where I live, right, that the Latino community has started to grow tremendously. And when I say the Latino community, it was primarily the immigrant community, right? It was people that were leaving their countries to move there, and they were moving there because that's at the time where the city started to grow exponentially. We started building stadiums, we started building concert venues, we started building neighborhoods, and who was building all of that? If you know anything about the immigrant population of the United States, there's an overrepresentation of young males, right? Not surprising, in the construction sector. And so what I started seeing back in those days, I had lived in the US for 5 years, I was working on my MBA, and all of a sudden, I started going to the stores, I started seeing around, and there were lots of young men from Latin America, new to the country. And I thought, Jose, I grew up in Mexico, I have a cultural context, I understand them, I speak the language, right? There's surely something that they need or they want, right? And so that's where I'm going to come up with my idea. And so the seed to what became Conexión Américas, which that's where I'm headed, was planted very much in a class. I said, what is something that they might need or want where I can provide some service? And that started my journey. I submitted my assignment. I graduated a few months later, and then very much like when you finish a degree, I was like, okay, so now what am I going to do with my life? I had finished my MBA. At that moment, I said, well, I can move back to Mexico. I had lived in the United States for 5 or 7 years now. Now I have a degree in the United States. I will be more marketable in Mexico, and that's fine. I said, or if I'm going to stay in the US, then I want to do something with this population. And so I really started digging deep. And so that was a process that took me about a year. I thought about things like starting a Latino bank that just specialized on serving the needs, the financial needs of the immigrant populations. Very unique, different types of circumstances and needs. I thought about starting an insurance company that just focused on Latino families. I thought about starting a real estate practice, a real estate firm working with Latino families that were pursuing their American dream of home ownership, right? All things that were, again, my undergraduate, my background, what I had been doing before was business, so I had like a business mind. And so all of those things. But it was in that journey that someone said, have you ever thought about a social enterprise? That's the first time I ever heard that term. And so this person explained to me what it was. It was the early days of social entrepreneurship, like as a field of study and as a thing, right? And so that put me on that path of what ultimately became Conexión Américas. And so Conexión Américas is today not my only, right? Because after that, I got to do a lot of different things, but my most successful and my most rewarding entrepreneurial endeavor. And what Conexión Américas is an organization that works with immigrant populations, primarily from Latin America, helping them realize their aspirations for prosperity and economic advancement. Today, we articulate the mission of Conexión as the notion of building a welcoming community where everybody can prosper and succeed and contribute, right? Those are three key elements. And so what Conexión Américas does is through a range of different programs and businesses. So inside of Conexión Américas is the shell, and inside is the shell of the enterprise, and inside of it there's different divisions that do different things. Do things like help people buying a house. And so that notion of starting a real estate firm materialized by that program of helping people buying a house. We have a program that helps people navigate the path to a college. Because in the US, well, anywhere, it's not an easy path, right? It's complicated, it's cumbersome, especially for immigrant origin families who really, the parents might not know how the system works in the United States. So we have a access to college service. Entrepreneurship. I'm going to hone in on that because that's one of my favorite and one of the most rewarding things that I've done, where I've spent some time. Immigrant entrepreneurship became a passion of mine because what I observed is that for a lot of immigrants, right? Yeah, many of them showed up and were working on the construction sites, but my light bulb went off early on and realized that there's a lot of commonality between the definitions, the characteristics of an immigrant and an entrepreneur, right? Think about it. What are some of those traits? Comfort with ambiguity, risk takers, hard workers. Right? You use those words and it's like, are you describing an entrepreneur or are you describing an immigrant? Well, you're describing both, right? The rate, and I started doing some studying, and I learned the rate of entrepreneurship, of actual business formation in immigrant communities, it's 3 or 4 times as much as the general population. And so I became really a student of and a passionate advocate for entrepreneurship of immigrant communities. And so we launched a program, a business inside of Conexión Américas that's called Negocio Próspero. That it's a micro enterprise development program. To this date, we have put about 500 individuals who have entrepreneurial aspirations. Everything from the construction worker that after 2 or 3 years said, you know what, I want to start my own construction company, to the restaurant owner, to the transportation guy, and so many other fields. And so we have a entrepreneurial, we are now today what is called an ESO, an entrepreneur serving organization, providing, specialized in that gap in the market, right? The immigrant populations. So Negocio Próspero is one of all the things that happen at Conexión Américas, is one of my favorite programs because, of course, it aligns very well with what I do in my work as a professor and as an academic. and so we launched Negocio Próspero, and naturally, what we found after 2 or 3 years was that there was an overrepresentation of immigrant entrepreneurs that wanted to start businesses in the food space. I have the recipe o los tamales de mi abuelita y yo los hago los domingos en mi casa y voy a la iglesia y los vendo ahí. But now there's a store that wants to buy 500 of them. I don't know how to do that. I need to have some licenses and some permits, right? And so it is out of that I heard a lot that we created inside of the entrepreneurship program a culinary incubator, Mesa Comal Café. And not Mesa Comal Café, just Mesa Comal. Mesa Comal is a co-working space for food entrepreneurs. It's a commercial kitchen that has all of the bells and whistles, all of the equipment, all of the licensing, all of the permits, all of the, had to go to all the bureaucracy, as you might imagine, when you're selling food, lots of red tape. And so created this incubator where now immigrant food entrepreneurs, almost exclusively, individuals who are thinking about launching a food-related business or have launched their business, everything from food trucks to catering companies to wholesalers, they can come and use it think of it as a co-working for food, right? And at any given point, we have 15 to 20 food entrepreneurs in the process of launching their businesses. And so that has been, I love entrepreneurship, and I love helping entrepreneurs, and I love food. And so this really brought together all of my skills, passions, in ways that nothing had ever done before. And so Mesa Comal has been recognized, received a lot of accolades nationally, and it's a great model that's been replicated in other parts of the country. And the most recent thing that I'll do, and I'll finish with that, is we did a partnership with, and this is called Nativo for this year, an open Mesa Comal Café in Belmont University. My two worlds collapsed. And so I went to the president, new president, very entrepreneurial, and I said, what if we opened a restaurant inside of the university and we offered it on a like an internship, and every 6 months we brought one of these food entrepreneurs to bring give them the opportunity to operate their restaurant, their business, their food concept at the university, so they can test it and so they can learn, the day-to-day operations of a restaurant, because many of them, that's what they want to do. They want to open a restaurant long term, right? And the president said, let's do it. And so a year and a half ago, we opened Mesa Comal Café. And so we have had the first one, we had a Mexican, like street tacos concept, went really, really well. Then the next semester we had an Indian food, Indian street food. The guy, food entrepreneur from India, who said, I just want to bring food, he studied in India, college. He said, what the stuff that I would eat when I was a student in my university, when I would go out of the campus and go to the little puestecito outside, I want to bring that food to campus. Smashing success. And now, just opened a couple of months ago, Nativo, which is more of a South American flair. So arepas, empanadas, it's like Colombian / Venezuelan type flair. So far, the best one yet, right? And so this is a little bit of my own current entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm involved in that has a connection. I thought I'd share that because it has a connection to place in the college campus and whatnot. Had someone said to me 30 years ago, you are going to be an entrepreneur, I would have said, no way, Jose. And I can say that. Right? What happened was I saw an opportunity of a need of a customer group that I was very familiar with. And my natural instincts and desires for service, for being a servant leader, and actually impacting the communities in which I live and work, this was able to bring it together in ways that I could have never imagined. As an immigrant in the United States, it was hard. The first 15 years, it was hard. You know, you leave your country, your culture, your family. Even though I'm married and my wife and I started a family and all of that was going okay, it was hard. It wasn't until I started Conexión Américas that I connected in a very emotional way, right? In a very emotional way to what I was doing. And it was then when I was able to truly say, I belong here. This is home now, right? This is home now. And I am impacting and building a welcoming community. I still miss my family. I still miss my siblings, my friends, my culture, the food, right? But entrepreneurship has been the channel, the mechanism that's allowed me to belong, contribute, and succeed.